Hello, today we're going to learn how to hand piece a 9 patch that looks like this. So we're going to start out with 4 lights and 5 darks, or you can have 5 darks and 4 lights. You just want to have some contrast there so you can tell the blocks apart. One important thing about hand quilt or hand piecing is that you need to be sure you mark accurately. So you want to mark on the backs of your blocks a 1/4 inch seam. Now, for beginners, I recommend that you mark all the way around and mark all of your blocks. So this is a little 1/4 inch ruler, and this is a little sandpaper glued to a board. Sandpaper is helpful. It keeps the piece of fabric from moving when you mark it. So what I recommend is, and you can use different marking tools. I like a pencil unless it's a dark fabric, and then I like this chalk pencil. You can sharpen it and keep the point sharp. There's also these markers. This blue, is water soluble, so you just spray it with water and it goes away. Be careful though with this water soluble or this pen not to touch your fabric with an iron because it can set and might not come out. This purple side is air erasable, and it just goes away by itself after a few minutes. So you mark as you go with this side. With this side, you could mark your whole block at one time and it would stay, but with this side, it may not stay until you get it done. So you would mark as you go. But I'm going to use these two today for this. So when you mark, you really want to try to do your best to sew at a 1/4 inch. So here's the 1/4 inch line. I usually lay it off of the edge of the quilt. Now when you're cutting, you want the line on the fabric, but when you're marking for hand piecing, I really want this line off the fabric because my pencil is going to take up this space of this line. So you just kind of drag your pencil along here and make a mark, turn it, line it up again, drag your pencil. You want this intersection. Now, when you get more experienced and can eyeball a 1/4 inch, you can just mark that intersection. You don't have to mark all the way around. But for beginners, I recommend that they mark all the way around. So again, you're gonna do this and then do your 4th side. Now, like I said, I recommend that you mark both. So if you have a dark piece, and I'm not going to do this whole one for sake of time, but if you have a dark piece, you're going to line this up. And with this chalk pencil, you know, it's not quite as sharp as the pencil. So you want to mark this. And then I would suggest you sew to this side of the line because this line's a little thicker than this line. So keep your stitches on this side of the line when you sew. There's also another really neat tool that I've found that I love for this. And when you get better at it, you can just mark your intersection points. So you would line this up here with the square, put you a dot there, and then that would be your intersection point. But for now, I just wanted to show you that. But for now, we're going to do the marking like this. So when you get these together, you put your right sides together, match your block up, make sure your 2 pieces are the same side, make sure that they're laying straight on one another, and you can pop a pin in there just to kind of keep it. Usually if I put 1 pin in, I'll put 2 because 1 pin lets it kind of skew, where 2 will keep it pretty solidly in place. All right, so just make sure they're not up in your sewing area. So then when you get your needle, you can do a quilter's knot. You want to have your needle and the end of your thread together kissing. Then you lay this thread on your needle and grab it with your thumb and forefinger and wrap 3 times, sometimes 4, sometimes I'll do 4. And then you just pull your thread through like you're making a stitch. And then there's your knot at the end. So when you hand piece, you do not sew the same as you do on a sewing machine. On a sewing machine, you would start here and you would run all the way to here. When you hand piece, you don't do that. You start at the intersection and you end at the intersection. So to keep this knot from being in the intersection and making bulk, you want to start about 1/8 of an inch past that intersection with your first stitch. So you come up, then you go into that intersection, and usually you would have these marked on both sides, and you would look at the back and make sure you're in the intersection on your back piece. And then I come back up right where my thread came out. Whoops. And bring that together. Okay, so then that's the back stitch. That's got you started. Then you're going to do what's called a running stitch. And I prefer, instead of going down, up, I prefer to hold my needle still and move the fabric. So you get your needle in, I get my finger back here to anchor the fabric, and then I move the fabric on to the needle instead of moving the needle up and down through the fabric. And that's a running stitch. So we're going to do that all the way across, and I'm going to do some bigger stitches just to get me across there to save time. And if your thread gets tangled, you can just put some lotion on your hands and rub it on the thread, and that'll help the thread feed through easier. There's also thread conditioner you can buy, but I find hand lotion works really well. So when I get to the end of this, I want to come up in the intersection. So I want to do the opposite of what I did at the other end. So I want to come up in that intersection. I want my needle to come out at that intersection, and I'm going to pull this. Make sure you're not ruffled up, so you don't want it to look like this. You want to be sure it's laying nice and flat. And then you're going to do your back stitch here. You're going to come back here and come right back up at that intersection. And then usually I get a little loop here and I tie a knot. And then I cut my thread. And take my pins out. And there you have your first stitch, or your first seam. So the thing that's really cool about hand piecing is when you do this, because those seams aren't connected like they would be on a sewing machine. If you did it on a sewing machine, your seams would all be like this. They would all kind of be sewn down. But when you hand piece, these are loose. So you can spin them and distribute the bulk, where that's not as easy to do when you do it on a sewing machine. So that I like that part about hand piecing, is that you can distribute that bulk and you get that nice little design on the back of your block. So that's pretty much it. You would keep going. You would sew, you would sew these three together, sew these three together, sew these three together, and then you would lay this one and do the very same thing. So when you get to this intersection, when you're sewing along here and you get to this intersection, when you're here, when you're right here, you want to lift this up and you want to go through these two. So you want to come through at your mark here at the intersection, come through that seam allowance to your mark over here at the intersection. You don't want to sew that down, you just want to go through it. And then you keep going to your running stitch, and then when you get over here, you're going to go through that mark at the intersection, put it through here to the mark at this intersection, and keep sewing along. So that's how even when you get these together, you don't sew your seams down like you would on a sewing machine. You lift them up and you go through them to the next intersection point. So that's why that marking is so important in hand piecing.